The crystal spires of Zephyria Prime gleamed under twin suns as Princess Lyralii stood on the balcony of the High Palace, watching the human delegation's ships descend through the atmosphere. Their vessels looked crude compared to the elegant bioships of her people, all angular metal and burning exhaust. Yet these primitive-looking craft had somehow ended a war that had raged for 3 centuries. Your Highness, Chancellor Morvith approached with careful steps, his blue skin pale with worry. The human delegation has arrived. The marriage ceremony can proceed as planned. Lyralii nodded, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. At 25 cycles old, she was considered young for a Zephyrian princess, but she understood her duty. The Terran Federation had offered something unprecedented, not just a ceasefire, but genuine peace between their species and the Zephyrian Empire. All they asked in return was a political marriage between their representative and a member of the royal family. It seemed too good to be true. The humans had appeared in their galaxy only 50 years ago, yet they had somehow managed to end conflicts that had persisted for millennia. Not just with Zephyria, but with dozens of other species. Wherever humans went, peace followed. It was almost supernatural. "Tell me again about this human I'm to marry," Lyralii said, her voice steady despite her fears. Chancellor Morvith consulted his datapad. Commander Marcus Chun, age 32 in human years. He's a career diplomat with the Terran Federation's Peace Corps. His record shows he's negotiated 17 successful treaties across the galaxy. No family of his own, no significant personal attachments. By all accounts, a safe choice. Safe. Lyralii almost laughed at the word. Nothing about this situation felt safe. The Galactic Council had been whispering for months about the humans. How they seemed to possess some unknown power that made even the most warlike species suddenly desire peace. Some claimed it was advanced technology. Others suspected mental manipulation. A few paranoid voices suggested something far more sinister. "Has anyone actually studied humans extensively?" she asked. "The Andromedans attempted to, Your Highness. Their research teams simply stopped reporting. When a rescue mission was sent to their laboratory ships, they found the entire research staff had joined human colonies. They claimed to have found true purpose in human society." A chill ran down Lyralii's spine. "And we're still proceeding with this marriage? Your father believes the benefits outweigh the risks. The war has cost us nearly 1 billion lives. If marrying one human can end it." Morvith's voice trailed off. The palace gardens below bustled with activity as servants prepared for the ceremony. Exotic flowers from across the galaxy had been arranged in intricate patterns, their bioluminescent petals creating a stunning display. Everything was perfect, exactly as tradition demanded for a royal wedding. "Your Highness," a young aide approached nervously. "The human shuttle has docked. Commander Chun is being escorted to his quarters." Lyralii turned from the balcony. "I suppose I should meet my future husband." The walk through the palace corridors felt endless. Portraits of her ancestors lined the walls, their expressions seeming to judge her decision. Would they understand that she was doing this for the good of their people? Or would they see her as a traitor, selling herself to an alien species? She found Commander Chun in the formal receiving chamber, studying a holographic display of Zephyrian art. He was smaller than she had expected, perhaps average height for a human, with dark hair and kind eyes. He wore a simple black uniform with minimal decoration, nothing like the elaborate robes favored by Zephyrian nobles. "Commander Chun," she said, entering the room with formal protocol. "Welcome to Zephyria Prime." He turned and offered what humans called a smile. "Princess Lyralii, it's an honor to meet you. Please call me Marcus." His manner was completely at ease, as if he were attending a casual social gathering rather than his own politically arranged marriage. This confidence should have been reassuring, but instead it sent warning signals through Lyralii's mind. "I trust your journey was comfortable?" she asked, falling back on diplomatic small talk. "Very much so. Your system is beautiful. I've been looking forward to this visit." Marcus gestured to the art display. "I was admiring your cultural exhibits. Zephyrian crystal sculpting is remarkable. The way you capture light and emotion in solid matter is something humans have never achieved. His knowledge surprised her. Most alien diplomats barely bothered to learn basic facts about Zephyrian culture before negotiations. You studied our people extensively, she observed. I believe understanding is the foundation of all lasting peace, Marcus replied. I've spent the last 6 months learning your language, your customs, your history. I know this marriage is a political necessity, but I hope we can at least build mutual respect. There was again that casual confidence. He spoke as if the marriage were already a certainty, as if her agreement were never in question. Most beings, even hardened diplomats, showed some nervousness when meeting royalty for the first time. Marcus seemed completely unaffected. The ceremony is scheduled for tomorrow, Lyralii said carefully. Are you prepared for the commitment this represents? I am. Marcus met her gaze directly. Are you? The question caught her off guard. She was accustomed to being the one asking challenging questions, not answering them. There was something in his eyes, a depth that made her feel suddenly exposed. I understand my duties to my people, she replied formally. That's not what I asked. Before she could respond, Chancellor Morvith entered the chamber. Your Highness, forgive the interruption. There's been a development. Lyralii felt her heart skip. What kind of development? The Korthak Empire has just declared war on the Zephyrian territories. Their fleet is mobilizing as we speak. The blood drained from Lyralii's face. The Korthaks were vicious, militaristic species known for enslaving conquered populations. They had been threatening Zephyrian borders for decades, held back only by the ongoing conflict with the humans that occupied most of their military attention. How large is their fleet? Marcus asked quietly. Morvith looked surprised by the human's calm tone. Intelligence estimates 3,000 warships, Your Highness. More than enough to overwhelm our current defenses. Lyralii's mind raced. With their military weakened by the human war, they had no hope of stopping a Korthak invasion. Unless the marriage must proceed immediately, she said. If we're to have any hope of human military support, that won't be necessary, Marcus interrupted softly. Both Zephyrians stared at him in shock. Commander, surely you understand the situation, Morvith stammered. Without the alliance is already in effect, Marcus said. The moment I set foot on this world, Zephyria Prime came under human protection. The marriage is a formality, not a requirement. Lyralii felt a chill run through her. What do you mean? Marcus's expression remained pleasant, but something flickered in his eyes. I mean, the Korthak fleet won't be a problem. In fact, I suspect they'll be calling off their invasion within the next few hours. How can you possibly know that? Morvith demanded. Because, Marcus said simply, 3 human ships are already in their system. The chamber fell silent. Lyralii's mind struggled to process what she was hearing. 3 ships against 3,000? It was impossible. Commander, she said slowly, I think there's been some miscommunication. 3 ships cannot possibly. Her words were cut off by an urgent chiming from Morvith's communication device. The Chancellor activated the holographic display, revealing the panicked face of Admiral Korvex, head of Zephyrian military intelligence. Your Highness. The Admiral's image flickered with static. We're receiving transmissions from the Korthak front. Their entire invasion fleet has surrendered. Surrendered? Lyralii whispered. To whom? To the human ships, Your Highness. The Korthak High Command is requesting immediate peace negotiations. They're offering to become a human protectorate. The hologram cut out, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Lyralii turned to look at Marcus, who was still smiling that same pleasant, casual smile. How she breathed. Humans have a particular talent for conflict resolution, Marcus replied. We find that most species become very reasonable once they truly understand the situation. For the first time in her life, Princess Lyralii began to understand why beings across the galaxy whispered about humans in hushed, frightened tones. And tomorrow, she was going to marry one of them. The wedding ceremony proceeded as planned, but the atmosphere had changed completely. News of the Korthak's surrender spread through the galaxy like wildfire, and suddenly, every major power was sending representatives to witness the marriage between Princess Lyralii and Commander Marcus Chun. What had begun as a simple political alliance had become the most significant diplomatic event in recent galactic history. Lyralii stood in her chambers, being fitted with the traditional crystal wedding gown that had been worn by royal brides for generations. The gown was beautiful, woven with threads of living light that responded to her emotions, currently swirling with nervous silver patterns. "Your Highness," her personal aide Zara spoke carefully, "the guests are arriving. The Andromedans, the Crystalline Collective, even representatives from the Void Watchers. I've never seen such a gathering." Through her window, Lyralii could see the massive ships arriving in orbit. Each one represented a civilization that had existed for millennia, species that had never shown interest in Zephyrian politics before. They were here because of one human. "Zara," Lyralii said quietly, "have you noticed anything strange about the human delegation?" Her aide paused in adjusting the gown's luminescent folds. "What do you mean, Your Highness?" "They're too calm, too confident. A normal diplomatic mission would show some nervousness, some uncertainty about protocols and customs. But they act like they've done this 1,000 times before." "Perhaps they have, Your Highness. Humans have been very active diplomatically." Lyralii turned to face her aide directly. "In 50 years, Zura. They've been in our galaxy for 50 years, and somehow they've become the dominant peacekeeping force. Doesn't that seem impossible to you?" Before Zara could answer, Chancellor Morvith entered the chamber, his face grim. "Your Highness, we need to speak privately." Zara quickly bowed and left. Morvith activated privacy shields around the chamber before speaking. "I've been conducting some discreet inquiries about our human guests," he began. "The results are disturbing. Tell me, I contacted old friends in the Andromedan Diplomatic Corps, asking about their research into human psychology. The official report stated that their scientists found humans to be remarkably peaceful and cooperative. But when I spoke to one of the researchers personally, he told me something different." Lyralii felt her stomach tighten. "What did he say?" "He said they never actually finished their research. 3 days into the study, every scientist on the project began reporting that further research was unnecessary. They all agreed that humans were naturally peaceful and that any deeper investigation would be unproductive and potentially harmful to galactic stability." "Potentially harmful how?" He couldn't explain. He just became agitated when I pressed for details and ended the communication. Morvith moved closer, lowering his voice. "Your Highness, I've spoken to representatives from 12 different species that have had extensive contact with humans. The pattern is always the same. Initial wariness, followed by sudden cooperation, followed by complete integration into human sphere of influence." Lyralii's hands trembled slightly, causing the light patterns in her gown to flicker. "Are you suggesting mind control?" "I don't know what I'm suggesting. But consider this. In 50 years, humans have ended conflicts between species that have been enemies for millennia. They've established trade networks that everyone agrees are fair and beneficial. They've solved resource disputes that previous generations thought impossible to resolve. Either they're the most naturally gifted diplomats in galactic history, or they have some other method of ensuring cooperation." Lyralii finished the thought. A soft chime indicated that the ceremony was about to begin. Lyralii took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. "We proceed as planned, but keep investigating. Quietly." The Great Hall of Zephyria Prime had never hosted such an assembly. Beings from across the galaxy filled the crystalline amphitheater, their various forms creating a stunning display of biological diversity. Some were humanoid like the Zephyrians, others were energy-based entities housed in containment fields, and still others defied easy categorization. Marcus waited at the altar, dressed in formal human attire that somehow managed to look both simple and elegant among the elaborate costumes of the other species. He stood perfectly at ease, as if the weight of 1,000 alien gazes meant nothing to him. As Lyralii walked down the aisle, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Every being in attendance was watching Marcus, not her, despite the fact that she was Zephyrian royalty, and this was her world. Every eye was fixed on the human. More disturbing still, many of the expressions she saw weren't just respectful, they were reverent. The ceremony itself followed ancient Zephyrian traditions. Elder Corvash, the highest religious authority on the planet, began the ritual bonding chant. But even he seemed different, his usually commanding voice carrying an undertone of deference when addressing Marcus. Do you, Marcus Chun of Terra, accept the sacred bond that will unite your people with ours in eternal alliance? Elder Corvash asked. I do, Marcus replied, his voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. And do you, Princess Lorelei of the Royal House Zephyr, accept this bond and all the responsibilities it entails? Lorelei hesitated for just a moment. In that pause, she felt the weight of history pressing down on her. Whatever she was about to become part of, it was larger than a simple political marriage. She was stepping into something that would reshape the galaxy itself. I do, she said finally. The moment the words left her lips, she felt something change. Not in the hall, not in the ceremony, but in herself. A subtle shift in perspective, as if she were seeing the galaxy from a slightly different angle. The sensation was so brief, she almost convinced herself she had imagined it. Elder Corvash raised his staff, causing the crystal formations throughout the hall to resonate with harmonic frequencies. By the ancient laws of Zephyria and the bonds of cosmic harmony, I pronounce you united in purpose and destiny. May your union bring prosperity to all beings. The assembled dignitaries erupted in celebration, but Lyralii barely heard them. She was staring at Marcus, trying to understand what she had just experienced. His expression was kind, even loving, but there was something else there, a satisfaction that went beyond personal happiness. Is everything all right? He asked quietly as they descended from the altar together. I felt something strange during the ceremony, she admitted. Like something changed inside my mind. Marcus's expression didn't change, but his grip on her hand tightened slightly. Marriage often changes how we see things. It's perfectly natural. But even as he said it, Lyralii knew it wasn't natural. The change hadn't been emotional or psychological. It had been something else entirely, something that felt almost like programming being installed. The reception that followed was magnificent, filled with delicacies from dozens of worlds and entertainment that showcased the best of galactic culture. But Lyralii found herself studying the other guests instead of enjoying the festivities. The pattern was unmistakable once she knew to look for it. Species that had been historical enemies were mingling freely, discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges with enthusiasm that seemed almost artificial. The Void Watchers, notorious for their isolationist policies, were actively seeking new diplomatic contacts. The warlike Draconian Empire was proposing joint research initiatives. Remarkable, isn't it? A voice said beside her. Lyralii turned to see Ambassador Thex of the Crystalline Collective, his geometric form pulsing with soft light. What is? How natural it all feels now. 6 months ago, my people would have considered most of these species to be threats or nuisances. Now I find myself genuinely excited about the possibilities for cooperation. Thex's crystalline structure shifted colors. It's as if we've all finally grown up, finally learned to see past our petty differences. When did this change begin for your people? Lyralii asked carefully. Approximately 4 months ago, when we signed our first trade agreement with the Terran Federation. Amazing how much perspective a little human wisdom can provide. Lyralii excused herself and moved through the crowd, listening to similar conversations. Every species present told the same story. Initial contact with humans, followed by a gradual shift toward cooperation and peace. They all described it as natural growth, as finally becoming enlightened enough to see past ancient conflicts. But Lyralii was beginning to suspect it wasn't growth at all. She found Marcus speaking with a group of military leaders from various worlds, discussing the establishment of joint peacekeeping forces. The conversation was animated and positive, with even traditionally aggressive species enthusiastically supporting demilitarization. "Ah, there's my beautiful wife," Marcus said as she approached, wrapping his arm around her waist. The gesture was affectionate, but she could feel the possessiveness in it. "I was just telling our friends here about humanity's philosophy of conflict resolution," he continued. "We believe that all beings naturally desire peace. Sometimes they just need help remembering that desire." "Help remembering?" asked General Corvith of the Draconian Empire, his reptilian features expressing genuine curiosity rather than the suspicion his species was known for. "Through understanding, through communication, through finding common ground," Marcus explained. "Humans have learned that beneath all the cultural differences and historical grudges, every intelligent species shares the same fundamental goals: security, prosperity, and the continuation of their people. Once they truly understand this, cooperation becomes inevitable." The group nodded in agreement, their various faces showing the same expression of enlightened comprehension. But Lyralii noticed something else. When Marcus spoke, their eyes became slightly unfocused, as if they were listening to something beyond just his words. As the evening progressed and the guests began to depart, Lyralii felt a growing certainty that she had just witnessed the most sophisticated form of conquest in galactic history. The humans weren't using weapons or threats. They were using something far more subtle and infinitely more effective. And now she was married to one of them. 3 weeks into her marriage, Princess Lyralii had learned to live with the constant feeling that her thoughts weren't entirely her own. It was subtle, like a gentle current guiding her mind towards certain conclusions. Whenever she began to seriously question human motives or methods, she would find herself distracted by positive thoughts about galactic peace and cooperation. But her natural intelligence was strong, and she had begun to develop techniques for thinking around the influence. She discovered that if she focused on technical details or abstract concepts first, she could sometimes examine the bigger picture before the mental guidance kicked in. She was in the palace library, researching historical patterns of galactic conquest, when Marcus found her. "Interesting reading?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. Lyralii closed the holographic display quickly, but not before he caught a glimpse of the title, Psychological Warfare in Ancient Civilizations. "Just catching up on some history I missed during my education," she said lightly. Marcus smiled, but his eyes had grown more attentive. "Find anything particularly fascinating?" "I was reading about the Minthri Empire. They conquered half the galaxy 3,000 years ago using what historians call willing submission. Their subjects believed they were making free choices to join the empire." "Clever strategy," Marcus acknowledged. "Much more efficient than traditional warfare." The casual way he said it sent a chill through Lyralii. "You don't seem disturbed by the idea of mental manipulation." "Should I be?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. "Consider the alternative. The Minthri could have used conventional weapons, killed billions, destroyed entire civilizations. Instead, they found a way to expand their influence without bloodshed. From a utilitarian perspective, isn't that preferable? But what about free will? The right of beings to make their own choices. Do beings really make free choices anyway?" Marcus asked. "We're all products of our genetics, our upbringing, our cultural conditioning. Human psychology recognizes that true free will is largely an illusion. We simply help other species recognize what they really want: peace, prosperity, security. We don't force anything on them." Lyralii stared at him, realizing that he was being completely honest with her. In his mind, what humanity was doing was genuinely helpful, even benevolent. They weren't seeing themselves as conquerors, but as liberators, freeing other species from the burden of conflict and confusion. "Marcus," she said carefully, "what exactly are humans?" "What do you mean? Were you really?" You appeared in our galaxy 50 years ago with technology that isn't significantly advanced, yet you can somehow convince entire civilizations to abandon millennia-old conflicts. That's not normal diplomatic skill. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler, more personal. You're fighting it, aren't you? The conditioning. Lyralii felt her heart skip a beat. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. You can feel it working in your mind, trying to guide your thoughts toward acceptance and cooperation. Most beings never even notice it, but you're unusually strong-willed. He reached over and took her hand. I'm actually impressed. It's been 3 weeks, and you're still questioning everything. The admission hit her like a physical blow. So you're confirming that you do something to people's minds? We help them find clarity, Marcus said. Think of it as therapy on a species-wide scale. We identify the psychological barriers that keep civilizations locked in destructive patterns, and we gently remove those barriers. Without their knowledge or consent. Would you ask a patient's consent before treating their mental illness? Would you allow someone to remain in a state of delusion if you could cure them? Marcus leaned forward earnestly. Lyralii, when we first encountered your people, you were locked in a war that had already killed 1 billion beings and showed no signs of ending. Your entire civilization was trapped in a cycle of violence and revenge that would have eventually destroyed you. We freed you from that. Lyralii pulled her hand away from his. By taking away our ability to choose. By taking away your ability to choose destruction, Marcus corrected. You can still make any other choice you want. You can pursue art, science, exploration, trade, culture. The only choice we've removed is the choice to cause unnecessary suffering. Standing up abruptly, Lyralii began pacing around the library. Her mind was racing, trying to process the implications of what she was learning. How many species have you done this to? 17 major civilizations, hundreds of minor ones. Every species we've encountered, and they all just accepted it. Eventually, some take longer than others. The more intelligent the species, the longer they tend to resist. But intelligence also means they eventually understand the benefits of what we're offering. Lyralii stopped pacing and faced him directly. What happens to those who never accept it? For the first time since she'd met him, Marcus looked uncomfortable. That's very rare, but it happens. Sometimes. He stood and moved toward her, his expression becoming more serious. Lyralii, I want you to understand something. What we do out of love. Love for all intelligent life in the galaxy. We've seen what happens when species are left to their own devices. Endless war, suffering, the eventual destruction of entire civilizations. We're preventing that by taking away their freedom, to destroy themselves and others. Marcus reached for her again, but she stepped back. Look at the galaxy now compared to 50 years ago. Conflicts that seemed impossible to resolve have been settled. Species that were on the brink of extinction are now thriving. Trade is flourishing. Science is advancing. Art and culture are experiencing a renaissance across dozens of worlds. He wasn't wrong, and that was what made it so terrifying. The galaxy was more peaceful and prosperous than it had been in recorded history. But it had come at the cost of something fundamental. The right of beings to make their own mistakes, to choose their own paths, even if those paths led to suffering. What are you planning to do with me? She asked quietly. Nothing. You're my wife. I care about you. I want you to be happy. But I'm resisting your conditioning. Yes, you are. And honestly, I find it fascinating. Most beings either accept the conditioning immediately or fight it for a few days before giving in. You've been fighting it for weeks without showing any signs of weakening. Marcus smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely admiring rather than condescending. I think you might be the strongest-willed individual I've ever encountered. Is that a problem for you? On the contrary, it's refreshing. Do you have any idea how lonely it gets being surrounded by people who agree with everything you say? Having a wife who actually challenges me, who makes me explain and defend my beliefs. It's something I've never experienced before. Lyralii stared at him in shock. You're enjoying this. I am. For the first time in years, I'm having conversations that feel real. With most beings, once they've been conditioned, they become very pleasant, but somewhat predictable. You're still completely yourself. Won't your superiors be concerned about that? Marcus shrugged. As long as you don't actively work against human interests, they don't care about your personal beliefs. You can question our methods, even disapprove of them, as long as you don't try to organize resistance or interfere with our operations. The casual way, he said, it revealed the true scope of human confidence. They weren't worried about resistance because they believed it was ultimately futile. Anyone with the knowledge and motivation to resist them would eventually be conditioned into compliance. Marcus, Lyralii said slowly, what happens if I do try to resist? What happens if I try to warn other species about what you're really doing? His expression became sad, almost pitying. Then we would have to take measures to ensure galactic stability. But I really hope it doesn't come to that. I've grown quite fond of you. The threat was delivered so gently, so lovingly, that it took Lyralii a moment to register what he was actually saying. If she became a problem, humanity would solve her the same way they solved all their problems, by taking away her ability to choose. I need some time to think about all this, she said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. Lyralii, I want you to know that despite everything, my feelings for you are real. I do love you in my own way. I hope you'll eventually come to understand that what we're doing is necessary. After he left, Lyralii sank into her chair, her mind reeling. She was trapped in a marriage with someone who genuinely cared for her, while simultaneously being part of the most successful conquest in galactic history. The worst part was that she was beginning to understand his perspective. The galaxy was objectively better under human influence, but understanding something and accepting it were very different things. She activated her personal communication device, using an encrypted channel she hoped the humans hadn't discovered yet. She needed to contact someone who might still have the ability to think freely about humanity's true nature, if such a person still existed anywhere in the galaxy. The encrypted message reached Dr. Kes Valantai on a remote research station in the Outer Rim territories. Valantai was a Xyrillian neuroscientist who had spent his career studying consciousness and free will across different species. More importantly, he was one of the few beings in the galaxy who had never had direct contact with humans. Princess, his holographic image flickered with static from the long-range transmission. What you're describing sounds impossible, yet explains so much about recent galactic politics. Lyralii spoke in hushed tones from her private chambers, using a signal scrambler she'd acquired from a draconian trader who claimed it could defeat human surveillance. Doctor, I need you to research something for me. I need to know if there's any historical precedent for this kind of large-scale psychological manipulation. I'll look into it immediately, Valantai promised. But, Princess, if what you're telling me is true, then I may be one of the last free minds in the galaxy. The implications are staggering. There's something else. My husband claims that humans have this ability naturally, that it's part of their psychological development. But that doesn't make sense evolutionarily. No species develops universal mental manipulation as a survival trait. Volandi's expression became thoughtful. Unless they had to. Princess, what if humans aren't originally from this galaxy? What if they're refugees from some catastrophe that forced them to develop these abilities? Refugees from where? That's what I intend to find out. Give me 3 days. The connection ended, leaving Lyralii alone with her thoughts. She had been married for a month now, and the conditioning was becoming stronger. She could feel it working constantly, try to convince her that resistance was futile and harmful. The only way she could maintain her independence was through constant mental effort, like swimming against a powerful current. Marcus had been patient with her questioning, even encouraging it, but she sensed that patience was wearing thin. During their dinner conversations, he would sometimes look at her with an expression that was part affection, part frustration and part scientific curiosity. You know, he said one evening as they dined on the palace terrace, most of my colleagues think I should be more proactive about your resistance to conditioning. What do you tell them? That you're valuable precisely because you maintain independent thought. You give me insights into how other resistant individuals might think. Marcus cut into his meal thoughtfully. Though I have to admit, your resistance is lasting longer than our projections indicated. Lyralii felt a chill. You have projections for how long resistance should last? Of course. We've encountered resistant individuals before. Usually, the conditioning overcomes natural resistance within 6 to 8 weeks. You're approaching 5 weeks with no signs of weakening. What happens at 8 weeks if I'm still resistant? Marcus set down his utensils and looked at her directly. We would need to take more direct measures, such as direct neural intervention. It's more invasive than our usual methods, but it's completely effective. His tone was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. But I really don't want it to come to that. I prefer you as you are. The casual mention of forced neural intervention sent ice through Lyralii's veins. She was running out of time. 3 days later, as promised, Dr. Valanti contacted her again. His expression was grim. Princess, I've made some disturbing discoveries. I've been analyzing historical records from the Galactic Core, specifically looking at data from before human arrival. What I found suggests that your husband may have been telling you the truth about humans being naturally suited for psychological manipulation, but not in the way you think. Explain. I found fragments of transmissions from a galaxy designated as Andromeda 7, approximately 60,000 light-years from here. These transmissions date back 52 years, just before humans appeared in our galaxy. Princess, they're distress calls. Lyralii leaned forward. Distress calls from whom? From every major civilization in that galaxy. They all tell the same story. A species had arrived that could somehow convince entire populations to abandon their own interests. The last transmission I could decode spoke of complete galactic unification under the rule of beings called humans. The blood drained from Lyralii's face. You're saying humans conquered an entire galaxy before coming here? It appears so, but here's where it gets truly frightening. The transmissions don't describe conquest. They describe voluntary submission. Every species in Andromeda 7 eventually joined the human collective willingly, believing it was their own choice. How was that possible? I think humans may have evolved beyond natural evolution. The ability you're describing, universal psychological manipulation, it's not a natural trait. It's too perfect, too sophisticated. I believe humans may have artificially enhanced their own species, possibly through some combination of genetic modification and technological augmentation. Lyralii's mind raced. But why would they need such abilities? Perhaps they were facing extinction in their original galaxy. Perhaps they encountered some threat so devastating that they had to choose between dying as they were or transforming into something that could survive by taking control of other minds. The implications were staggering. If Dr. Valanti was correct, then humans weren't just conquerors. They were refugees who had been forced to become something monstrous in order to survive. And now they were doing to this galaxy what they had apparently done to their last one. Doctor, is there any way to resist the conditioning permanently? I've been working on that. From what I can determine, the conditioning works by exploiting natural neural pathways related to social cooperation and hierarchy recognition. In theory, it should be possible to disrupt these pathways through targeted electromagnetic fields or certain pharmaceutical compounds. Do you have access to such compounds? I'm working on synthesizing something. But, Princess, even if I succeed, there's a larger problem. If humans have already conditioned most of the galaxy, then freeing a few minds won't be enough to stop them. What would be enough? We would need to find their source. Whatever technology or facility they use to generate their conditioning effects, it must have a central point of control. If we could disable or destroy that. Before he could finish, Lyralii heard footsteps approaching her chamber. I have to go. she whispered, cutting the transmission. Marcus entered the room just as the holographic display faded. His expression was pleasant, but his eyes were watchful. Lyralii, we need to talk. About what? About your recent communications with unauthorized parties. Marcus moved to the window, gazing out at the city below. I know you've been in contact with someone outside our sphere of influence. I can see it in your behavior patterns. Lyralii's heart pounded, but she tried to remain calm. I don't know what you mean. My dear wife, you forget that I'm trained to read psychological indicators. Your resistance to conditioning has actually made you easier to read in some ways, not harder. When someone influences your thinking, it shows. Marcus turned back to her, his expression sad but determined. I've been patient because I care about you. But my superiors are beginning to question whether your continued resistance poses a security risk. And what did you tell them? That I have the situation under control. But they want proof. Marcus reached into his jacket and withdrew a small device that looked like a modified neural interface. This is a temporary conditioning amplifier. If you allow me to use it on you, it will strengthen the existing conditioning without causing permanent changes to your neural structure. Lyralii stared at the device in horror. And if I refuse, then my superiors will send specialists to handle the situation more permanently. Marcus's voice was gentle, almost apologetic. Lyralii, I'm trying to protect you. The amplifier will make you more compliant, but you'll still be essentially yourself. If the specialists come, they'll completely restructure your personality. She was trapped. If she refused, she would face something even worse than what Marcus was offering. If she accepted, she would lose her ability to resist, and any hope of stopping the human expansion would die with her free will. How long do I have to decide? She asked quietly. Until tomorrow night. After that, the decision will be taken out of my hands. As Marcus left her alone with the terrible choice, Lyralii realized she had less than 24 hours to find a way to strike back at the most successful conquerors in galactic history. And she would have to do it while fighting against her own mind, which was desperately trying to convince her that resistance was not only futile but wrong. Lyralii spent the night in meditation, using ancient Zephyrian mental techniques to strengthen her natural resistance to the conditioning. By dawn, she had made her decision. She would not submit to the amplifier, which meant she had to act before Marcus's superiors arrived. But first, she needed to understand exactly what she was fighting. Using palace maintenance tunnels she'd explored as a child, Lyralii made her way to the human quarters undetected. Marcus was in meetings with planetary officials, leaving their section relatively unguarded. She slipped into his personal office, hoping to find information about human operations. What she found was beyond her worst fears. The human database contained detailed files on every major species in the galaxy, including psychological profiles, conditioning strategies, and implementation timelines. But the most disturbing discovery was a file labeled Project Unity, a comprehensive plan for what humans called galactic integration. According to the documents, the current phase was nearly complete. Once all major civilizations have been brought under human influence, Phase 2 would begin, the gradual elimination of what humans termed inefficient biological diversity. Species would be slowly guided toward genetic modification programs that would make them more compatible with human psychology and governance. The final phase was the complete dissolution of individual species identities. Within 5 generations, every intelligent being in the galaxy would be psychologically and genetically uniform, essentially human in all but name. It wasn't conquest. It was extinction through assimilation. Lyralii copied the files and transmitted them to Dr. Valantai using an emergency burst transmission, then destroyed all evidence of her presence. She returned to her chambers just as Marcus was arriving for their scheduled meeting. Have you made your decision? He asked, producing the conditioning amplifier. I have, Lyralii replied, then activated her personal defense shield and drew the ceremonial blade that was her right as a royal princess. Marcus looked more surprised than concerned. Lyralii, what are you doing? I'm choosing to fight. With a sword? Against human technology? Marcus shook his head sadly. My dear, you can't win through violence. Even if you killed me, there are protocols in place. My death would only accelerate the timeline for your planet's full integration. I know, Lyralii said. That's not my plan. She lunged forward, not at Marcus, but at the conditioning amplifier in his hands. Her blade sliced through the device, causing it to spark and emit a high-pitched whine before dying. Now you'll have to explain to your superiors why you no longer have a way to demonstrate control over me, she said, backing away, but keeping the blade ready. Marcus stared at the destroyed device, his calm demeanor finally cracking. Do you have any idea what you've just done? They'll send a full conditioning team now. They'll restructure your entire personality. Let them come. Before Marcus could respond, Lyralii's communication device chimed with an emergency signal. Dr. Volante's image appeared, his face flushed with excitement. Princess, I've analyzed the files you sent. I've found it, the source of their power. Marcus moved to cut the transmission, but Lyralii kept her blade between them. Tell me, Doctor, it's not technology, Princess. It's biological. Humans have a modified neural organ that produces a form of psychic radiation. Every human vessel, every human colony, is essentially a broadcasting station. But the network requires a central coordinator, a master node that synchronizes all the individual transmitters. Where is this master node? According to your files, it's hidden on Earth itself, in a facility called the Unity Center. If that facility were destroyed or disabled, the entire conditioning network would collapse. Every species they've influenced would suddenly regain their natural psychological independence. Marcus finally spoke, his voice cold with fury. Even if what he's saying is true, Earth is the most heavily defended world in human space. You could never reach it. Maybe not, Lyralii said. But I know someone who can. She activated another communication channel, this one connecting to a ship currently in orbit around Zephyria Prime. The face that appeared belonged to Captain Thane of the Void Watchers, the one species in the galaxy known for their ability to travel through dimensions. Captain, Lyralii said urgently, I need passage to Earth immediately. And I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you about what humans have done to your mind. The next few minutes were chaos as Lyralii rapidly explained the truth about human conditioning to Captain Thane while Marcus attempted to activate emergency protocols. But something unexpected happened. As Dr. Volante's research had predicted, simply knowing about the conditioning seemed to weaken its effects. Captain Thane's expression shifted from confusion to anger to cold determination. Princess, if what you're saying is true, then my people have been slaves for 3 years without knowing it. It's true, she confirmed. Will you help me? I'll do more than that. I'll contact every Void Watcher ship in the galaxy. If there's one thing we value above all else, it's the freedom to choose our own path. Marcus lunged for the communication console, but Lyralii's blade was at his throat before he could reach it. It's over, Marcus. Your secret is out. You don't understand, Marcus said desperately. Without conditioning, the galaxy will tear itself apart. We've prevented countless wars, saved billions of lives. If you destroy the Unity Center, all those old conflicts will resurface. The suffering will be unimaginable. Maybe, Lyralii admitted, but that will be their choice to make. Within hours, Captain Thane had assembled a small fleet of Void Watcher ships, each one carrying beings who had been freed from conditioning by the simple act of understanding what had been done to them. The knowledge spread like wildfire. Once a being understood the true nature of human influence, they could begin to resist it. Dr. Volante had been right. Awareness was the key to freedom. The journey to Earth took 3 days through dimensional space. During that time, Lyralii broadcast her revelations across the galaxy, using Zephyrian royal communication networks. The response was immediate and dramatic. Species that had been peaceful for decades suddenly remembered their grievances. Trade agreements were canceled, alliances dissolved, and several worlds declared independence from human protection. But something unexpected happened too. Many species, even after learning the truth about conditioning, chose to maintain their relationships with humanity. They had experienced decades of peace and prosperity under human influence, and some decided that the benefits outweighed the cost of mental autonomy. Earth itself was a fortress protected by thousands of ships and orbital defense platforms. But Void Watcher technology allowed them to approach through dimensional folds, bypassing the conventional defenses. They materialized in the atmosphere above the Unity Center, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with psychic energy. The battle was brief but decisive. Void Watcher ships phased in and out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to target, while Iralii led a strike team directly into the Unity Center itself. The facility was beautiful and terrifying, vast chambers filled with crystalline matrices that amplified and focused the psychic radiation of thousands of humans. At the center was a single chamber containing what appeared to be a human in a suspended animation tank, their neural activity displayed on surrounding screens. The Prime Coordinator, Dr. Valentai, breathed. This individual's neural patterns are being used to synchronize the entire network. Lyralii approached the tank, looking at the serene face of the being inside. They appear to be in their 30s, with features that suggested a mixture of Earth ethnicities. According to the displays, they had been in suspension for over 50 years. If we wake them up, she realized, the network will collapse. Yes, but Princess, Dr. Valentai pointed to other readings. This person is being kept alive artificially. Their body can't survive outside the tank. Waking them means killing them. Lyralii stared at the figure in the tank, understanding that she was looking at the ultimate victim of human transformation. This person had been sacrificed to become the living foundation of humanity's galactic empire. They had given up their own life and freedom to impose a terrible peace on the galaxy. "Do it," she said quietly. As Dr. Valentai began the awakening sequence, alarms blared throughout the facility. Human defenders were fighting desperately to reach the central chamber. But it was too late. The Prime Coordinator's eyes opened for the first time in half a century. They looked at Lyralii with confusion and pain, their lips moving soundlessly. Then, after 30 seconds that felt like eternity, they smiled and closed their eyes forever. Across the galaxy, the change was instantaneous. Billions of beings suddenly felt their minds clear, as if awakening from a pleasant dream. Ancient grudges reasserted themselves, but so did genuine friendships and alliances. Some species immediately declared war on humanity, while others offered continued cooperation on equal terms. The galaxy had chosen chaos over control, uncertainty over imposed peace. Lyralii returned to Zephyria Prime to find her marriage officially annulled and Marcus under house arrest. But when she visited him, she found him surprisingly at peace. "Are you happy with what you've accomplished?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "The galaxy is already fracturing again. There will be wars, suffering, death. But it will be their choice," Marcus said, echoing her own words from days earlier. "I've had time to think without the conditioning network influencing even my own thoughts. For the first time in my life, I can see clearly what we became. What will you do now?" "Help rebuild, but differently this time. Humans still have much to offer the galaxy. Our diplomatic skills, our knowledge, our genuine desire for peace. But we'll offer it as equals, not as masters. And if other species refuse?" Marcus smiled sadly. "Then we'll respect that choice. Even if it means we have to live with the consequences of a galaxy where beings are free to make terrible decisions." 6 months later, Princess Lyralii stood once again on her palace balcony, watching the ships in orbit. Some belonged to species that had resumed old conflicts, others to new alliances that had formed without human influence. The galaxy was messier, more dangerous, more unpredictable than it had been. But it was free, and for Lyralii, that made all the difference.